Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. Brian Dick is away this week, so I'm joined by Ryan Deeney to discuss Blues' 3-2 defeat to Hull, a first league defeat at St Andrews since April 2024, where it all went wrong and all the fallout. Then we'll look at the state of play in the Championship before looking ahead to Preston with some help from Preston reporter George Hodgson from the Lancashire Evening Post. Ryan, thank you for coming on. I feel like this might be a little bit of a therapy session after Blues' recent run of form.
Yeah, I think as we've probably just been speaking about before we jumped on air, it's a very weird situation at the moment where we're not a bad football team, yet we really do look a bad football team at times, and it's hard to really know what the answers are at the moment. But yeah, Saturday was a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, Saturday's game got overshadowed with all sorts of things after the game. But if we take it back and look at how Blues actually played, I don't think they played too badly, Ryan. Like if you look at the chances they had, the shots they had, the touches in Hull's box, I thought attacking wise, it was one of the best performances Blues have put in this season. I thought they put a lot of good stuff together. That might be due to Hull being one of the worst defensive setups in the Championship as well. Every single Hull game at the moment seems to be high scoring. But then obviously there was the red card, and we'll come on to that. But do you agree? Do you think Blues played well against Hull?
I thought we played really well. It's that weird thing, isn't it, of our games at the moment. I think even with the Wrexham game after the first sort of 20 minutes or so, we've looked a really good football team in terms of the way we're playing, the rotations, the way we're sort of progressing towards the final third, and starting to get a few more shots off a goal. Looking a bit more of a general threat, getting players into better areas of the pitch. I thought the balance actually looked quite nice here with the way that Anderson and Roberts were dovetailing on the right-hand side, the way Peck and Gray were dovetailing down the left. I thought it was to give the guys down the right a little bit more than perhaps Cochrane did with the guys down the left. But again, I'd imagine, I suppose we're kind of used to that in a way. But yeah, as you say, Anderson got slipped in a couple of times into the area. Peck had a couple of efforts from inside the box. Gray had his usual sort of posh shots, but I feel like the problem with Gray was he ended up sort of being 2-3 on 1 with not enough support elsewhere other than really from Peck. Problem is you do all this and you play pretty well, and then it literally felt like we had 10 minutes of play, and the first time that Hull broke, they scored. And then from there, I think they had one half chance with Galhart, and then otherwise, again, they break once down the left-hand side, and they've got a free man in the box and they score, and you just go, you're almost doing everything right, except for every time you make a mistake or get something wrong, you're being punished, and it's happening every single game at the moment, and it's hard to know what the answer is without just breaking down every goal and realising that everybody at some point has had some sort of form of mistake within a goal, except for probably Clara.
Yeah, I mean, defensively at the moment, Blues, it feels weird to say, given how solid they were last season, how solid they were really over the first 4 or 5 games this season, but they do look a bit of a mess. Second half, I know they go down to 10 men, and Chris Davies did go for it, to be fair. He didn't bring on any, defensive reinforcements when Jack Robinson was sent off. He just basically brought on more attackers and took more defenders off. I think by the end of the game, Blues had Clara as the only recognised defender on the pitch, didn't they? Which is a little bit crazy in itself, but they were conceding a lot of chances, and James Beadle had to bail them out on more than one occasion. But to be fair, even with 10 men, Blues did create some good chances. You think of they almost had a goal from a corner with that Beadle header. We haven't said that this season. Kyogo worked that chance for himself and then typically produces a very, very poor finish, which has been symptomatic this season. And, Patrick Roberts, throughout the whole 90 minutes, I thought he was the best player on the pitch for both teams. I thought he was absolutely superb in the way that he carried the ball and created chances for his teammates. There was a lot to like. It just, again, we come back to the point, they kind of crack one thing where they become more of a threat going forward. And then all of a sudden they're shipping goals at the other end. And to concede 3 at home, I know, the third came with 10 men. is poor in any game, really. And I think the way Blues conceded the goals, as you said, Ryan, the first goal was a very poor one to concede. The second goal probably worse, because I think that came as a result of Blues switching off a little bit after that altercation between both sets of players in the benches. And the third, it felt like was always going to come, given the number of counter-attacks Hull had in that second half. So, yeah. Should we move on to Jack Robinson?
Do we have to?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not been the best start to his Blues career, has it? 4 games, 2 red cards and an own goal. It's very difficult to say anything positive about him other than that Swansea game, really, when he first came in. So, go on.
I was just going to say, we're stuck with our centre halves then. I thought Robinson, he come in against Swansea and he provided the kind of balance and progression with the ball that we've probably lacked with the Neumann and Clara partnership. Yeah. And it felt like we had a bit more natural balance. We had someone who could, ping the ball one side. He was playing through the lines. And then you get to Coventry, and I think the first one's one of them is just bouncing ball and you think you get in there and he misses it. The second one, not only does he miss the header, it's the clumsy nature of... I didn't realise at the time, because it looks like he just turns around and just drags him down unnecessarily. What actually happens is he turns around and stands on his foot, doesn't he? And he's falling over, so he's just clinging onto whatever he can to keep his balance. But yeah, it's clumsy. I thought he was okay against Wrexham. It was actually his pass that led to the great chance trying to play through the lines, and then you get to yesterday. I don't know if you've seen the video. It's pointed out to me this morning, but when you see the video, Robinson says something, gets booked, then says something as he's walking away, and you see Peck immediately grab him as he's saying it, as if to sort of say, like, kind of knowing straight away that he said something silly.
Well, he didn't complain, did he? No one's complained about it, so yeah.
No, and I think the state of that action is, it's one thing just being a bit naff defensively, it's another thing to lose your head in that way. I think particularly when everyone's got it in their head as well after the cup game earlier in the season with him screaming at the linesman.
Yeah.
And that lack of discipline, even Chris Davies didn't protect him, and he finds a way to try and protect everybody, doesn't he? It's one of them where I think a lot of people were quite happy never to see him in a blue shirt again, which only again increases the questions around our centre halves and the recruitment and everything else this summer.
That is strong. To be fair, I think at some point he's got a 2-year contract. We probably are going to see him again in the blue shirt, but he can't really afford any more misdemeanors like that, because he let his teammates down, he let Chris Davies down, and let the fans down, because Blues probably, I think, would have got something out of that game had he stayed on the pitch, given the way they were playing. Again, there were 2 key moments. That the altercation before half-time killed Blues in that they switched off and Hull went to score and got the second goal before half-time. And then Blues come out again. They're a stronger team in the first 13, 14 minutes of that second half. And then bang, incident happens. Then obviously they lose control of the match. So really, really poor from Jack Robinson. And I know we're both probably advocates for the left-footed centre-back, aren't we? Because of the passing lanes that it opens up. But I feel like at this point, Blues have to go back to Neumann, don't they? They have to have a 2 right-footed centre-backs, don't they, Ryan?
Well, you've got 3 options to play alongside Clara, or naturally anyway. You've got 3 options, haven't you? Which is Neumann, who is big, a bit more physical, obviously gives us a bit of pace, which we lack, but his progression of the ball is almost non-existent, so you kind of lose that nature of it. If you play him as the left-sided centre-back, his role in possession is going to be even more important than it would be on the right-hand side, where he's more likely to get caught. So again, is that a risk you take? It just feels like either way you lose a bit of progression with the ball, and you've almost got to try and find another way to get that back into the side. Robinson, let's be honest, he's proven a liability so far because of the 2 red cards, both completely avoidable. And Erin Cashin, I don't really want to go back there, to be honest. He looks every bit that's kind of centre-back that we don't need. He looks like a kind of centre-back who wants to sit on the edge of his box, head clear, and, just do the dirty stuff.
It's hard to go back to Cashin, isn't it? I mean, he obviously had that real horror show against Sheffield Wednesday, and I do think at this point, Chris Davies probably can't justify selecting Cashin to play over Neumann against Preston, particularly when Neumann hasn't really done anything wrong defensively. I think, as you said, as you pointed out, the issue with Neumann is that he doesn't bring the ball out particularly well. That was something that was pointed out to me when I was speaking to someone over in Germany who'd watched a lot of Hanover's games, in that when teams played against Hanover, Neumann was often the defender they would try and trigger the press against, because they felt like they he would make mistakes in possession. So that's something we've seen. I really hope that when he comes in, or if he comes in, he can get back to the level that he showed against Ipswich on the opening night, because I thought he was fantastic in that game. I had no reservations after watching that. But Cashin and Brian made a point on a previous podcast about Cashin. He feels like someone who needs a run of games to find his rhythm. And the position Blues are in the league they're in, I don't think they can afford to allow someone that luxury of being able to find their rhythm. They need someone who's probably just going to give them a little bit of solidity, and I feel like Neumann is the best bet for that one. Yeah,
it feels a little bit like, I suppose with Neumann you kind of lose the need to have to protect the defence a little bit more. It just means that your play going forward potentially becomes a little more stodger, which is obviously a big issue given that our whole game and our whole structure is based around our ability to, progress from the back and being able to play.
Yeah.
I think if you bring Cashin in, you've almost got to do something else to try and protect him more, which then loses you a man further up the field, which then causes even more issues. And I think at the moment, in a strange sort of way, we are very, very good defensively in terms of being able to avoid the issue and avoid teams being able to attack us regularly. It's just that when they do break us, they're hurting us, and we've got to find a way to be able to avoid that. The other option may be to bring Tomoki Iwata in, play him at centre half, but again, that means you have got probably 9 outfielders on the pitch that are 5'7" or smaller.
I was going to say, good luck, Chris Clara, when the ball comes in the box. That does feel like an option, but again, it means probably bringing in Asai Samuel back in. Then you sort of lose the ability to have someone next to Leonard in midfield, which then creates the issue of having the 2 midfielders in there, and we don't have a natural perhaps option of the way Dow did it last year, or perhaps even Willemsen, where they almost create that 3 in midfield. Yeah. And we probably don't have that this time around because we don't have those types of footballers. Roberts is very much an attacker. He wants to pick the ball up higher up the pitch. So again, you've got another question around that and whether that works as a balance in terms of allowing I suppose making sure that the midfield is solid enough. And again, can you play 3 in midfield? Well, probably not, because you don't have the athleticism in there to actually get up and support the attack. Yeah. I think we saw that against Stoke with Doyle in the 10. Yeah. I think it'd be the same issue if you play Peck in there as well. So again, it just feels like you fix one issue and another issue arises somewhere else, and it's hard to find that perfect balance. Yeah, Chris Davies, actually, when I was speaking to him about Tommy Doyle last week, made it clear that in the 10 position, he wants someone who's kind of more athletic, who can get across the pitch and almost go beyond Stansfield sometime as well, which we've seen it at times this season. Blues, when it's been Kyogo and Stansfield, with Stansfield as a 10, or when Stansfield has generally played as a 10, it's looked more of a 4-4-2 out of possession because the way he plays it. So I don't think we're going to see a 3-man midfield anytime soon. An interesting game, looking at the defence again. Blues haven't named the same back 4 in 3 successive league games yet this season, which I think, again, just kind of suggests, tells us why the defensive performances have really tailed off recently. There's no consistency in a position or an area of the field where you do need consistency and need to have relationships and understandings. That hasn't been there for Blues, which brings us to the wider question. I think a lot of people are talking about now is, have Blues actually improved their central defenders from last season? Obviously, Blues ended last season with Ben Davies and Clara as the undisputed first choice pairing. Christian Bielik was back up, and then Grant Hanley was there as well. At the start of this season, Blues had Clara, Neumann, Cashin and Bielik. I think I at the moment, my position is, I think Blues should have really pushed the boat out and tried to bring Ben Davies back. People can say, Ben Davies isn't starting at Oxford. There might be reasons for that. He might not have, reached full fitness. Gary Rout at Oxford might have, taken a shine to a different defensive pairing, which is absolutely fine. For Blues and the way they play, Ben Davies was absolutely perfect last season. I don't think they needed to meddle with that one. I think they really should have tried harder to bring him back.
I think it's a difficult question to ask whether we've improved because you're bouncing between the levels, aren't you? I mean, for me, I've seen Bielik play at this level and he's more than good enough. But does he solve the athleticism issue? Probably not, which means that we would remain a problem as a back four in terms of, players being able to run. Davies, again, would be a similar issue. I think what Bielik and Davies probably give you over Robinson and Cashin is just that assurance in possession and also the ability to not be a liability.
It's a bit harsh.
Yeah, I realise that sounds a bit harsh on those two, but you've seen them play 4 games so far, and in what was it, 5 games since Neumann got dropped?
Yeah, 5.
I mean, 3 of them, undeniably, those 2 have cost us. Probably cost us a victory, if not anything more.
Yeah.
So those 2 probably give you that bit of assurance, that bit of experience and leadership and composure with the ball. But again, it doesn't really solve the athleticism issue. And I think there is a discussion to be had there of if you're 3 options or even 4 options, because I think there was talk about us possibly going for Ben Mee as well, weren't there? And if they're your options going into the final month of the window, you've got Cashin, Ben Davies, Jack Robinson and possibly Ben Mee as your options to play as that left-sided centre-back. What went wrong?
Yeah, Ron, are you going to get everything though if you think about it? Like, are you going to look at Clara? Okay on the ball, bringing it out, pretty decent. He offered some assists last season from that inside right position. Good on the right hand side. Obviously, physically excellent when the ball comes into Blues box, but fast, not particularly. I mean, he's been susceptible this season when wingers have managed to isolate him in 1v1 situation, particularly against Swansea. If we're saying Neumann has, the physical qualities, speed in abundance, but not very good on the ball. So, do you think we're going to get the full package in the Championship, where you've got a player who's good enough on the ball, very good in the air, and can also run and keep up with his man?
You're probably not going to get everything perfect, are you? And again, you don't quite know what conversation having behind the scenes, what other players we perhaps tried to bring in and maybe weren't able to do so. So there's questions to be had there. I think the biggest frustration is that we probably knew from February that we were going to need another centre-half because Ben Davies was on loan. Obviously, we had the Bielik. We knew Neumann was joining, but we knew from February that this needed to be addressed. And I suppose the way we found ourselves right at the back end of the window, just having to try and bring anybody in and hoping that they could also play left-back as well.
Yeah.
It just feels like something went wrong, and it's the kind of question we can't answer because we don't know exactly what happened.
That is the real frustration, because they did have a lot of time. Blues knew they were going to be in the Championship really from about early February onwards, didn't they? Given the lead they built up in League One, so they had a lot of time to identify targets, and have these discussions. And that was one of my frustrations in the summer, that they only managed to get their full centre back through the door who could cover at left back on deadline day, and that came around through a whole number of circumstances, with Sheffield United signing a different player to replace Jack Robinson so he could leave. So it was a crazy situation. So it didn't feel like it had been planned, did it? It just felt like something that had been rushed into at the end. So one signing that felt planned but hasn't worked out at all so far is Tommy Doyle. And again, we keep talking about Tommy Doyle because supporters are desperate to see more of him, because when he's on the pitch, he does do eye-catching things. I think when he came on Saturday, he found a lovely ball through to Damari Gray that resulted in a decent shot by him. And he does neat and tidy things. But he's only made 2 Championship starts, one against Stoke where he's number 10. I don't think we're going to see that again, as I mentioned earlier. And one as one of 2 number 6s against Sheffield Wednesday, when he did play quite well, was one of the better players, I thought, before being taken off by around the 60-minute mark. So do we think now is the time to give Tommy Doyle a chance? Because I've mentioned a couple of times, I think Peck has had some really good games this season, but I also think he's had some kind of lacklustre games where he hasn't been anywhere near the level we'd expect from a South Korean international. Do we think Tommy Doyle deserves a run in that position?
My concern with throwing Doyle in now, if we're talking about Doyle or Peck, is Peck is essentially playing as a 10. In this, he's playing so high up because of Watters dropping into midfield next to Leonard that you'd essentially be pushing Doyle higher up the pitch.
To be fair, Ryan, I'd probably think that Awata moves back into midfield against Preston. I think, I think so now. Yeah, I don't think he trained enough before the Hull game to play.
No, that's fair enough. But yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, that might answer that one. It essentially probably became a case of Doyle or Leonard's players that the City midfielder. Obviously, Davies sort of muddled his way through that answer, I think, when asked the other day. Although, to be fair, it was nice to see him praise Leonard and sort of, Leonard's earned his stripes. It's a difficult question because I think Doyle gives us a quality with the ball that I think fans are probably desperate to see, where he does just receive the ball and everything goes forward. Even to the point where he's trying, I think he's done it a couple of times now, where he's tried pot shots from sort of 25, 30 yards, and most of them don't go anywhere.
I'd rather him do it than Awar to do it, though, to be honest.
There was one at the weekend, he tried on his left foot, and you just find yourself screaming, but Iwata's done it enough, so it's not a Doyle thing. The main concern is I don't think he actually increases our issues off the ball, and I think so many of our issues are coming either through centre halves doing really silly things, or I think both the goals of the weekend came from midfielders not reacting to the seconds and stuff. And does Doyle actually improve that? Because the rest of it is fine in terms of our, the way we're progressing forward and getting into the final third. It's just whether Doyle gives us enough.
It's a physicality issue, isn't it? I would say.
Yeah, I'm loath to sort of. The problem I keep finding with myself is I'm reaching the point where I'm worried about what players can't do rather than what they can do. And I think a lot of the fans are looking at it going, well, he can do that and he can do that. And there probably is an argument to say, actually, Doyle gives you so much with the ball. Is it worth just throwing him in there and sort of taking the hit of, we might concede a few more chances, but he will do things quicker and get the fans on board quicker. And it's, what do you lose bringing him in? I think is the problem at the moment. The big question.
My thinking is games like Hull, games like Preston, where you would expect Blues to have a lot of the ball because they're two teams that don't really have much of it. I think Preston average about 45% possession over their games in the Championship this season. I think you can afford to have Doyle in those games, because he's not going to have to do much of the off the ball stuff that maybe Chris Davies isn't entirely comfortable with him yet in his system. He's going to have the ball an awful lot, and that's where I think Doyle does excel. I think Peck's excellent in possession as well, don't get me wrong. I think the two of those are clear of the four midfield players in terms of what they do with the ball. I thought Peck was really progressive first half against Hull, to be honest. But I do think you can afford to play Doyle against Preston. And whether that's at the expense of Peck, I'm not sure. Maybe it is. It does seem like those two are in kind of direct competition for me at the moment, especially if we are moving Awata back into midfield against Preston, which I think probably will be the case with Asai Samuel back at right back.
I think your interview with him the other day essentially said that Doyle is more of a 6 to 8, isn't he, rather than a 6. So it seems very much like
he's saying Leonard versus Awata and Peck versus Doyle. It feels like, So yeah. But in an interview with Richard Wilford, to be fair, on BBC Radio WM, Chris Davies did say that there were some things kind of that Tommy Doyle's still learning about the system, particularly out of possession. That's why I'd obviously gone with Mark Leonard for the Wrexham game and for the Hull game. So yeah, that's one to watch. I do feel like we are getting to the stage where if Peck and Awata's not working, if Peck and Leonard's not working, then surely Tommy Doyle does deserve a chance. Yeah,
I think there was it's hard to judge him in the substitute appearance, isn't it? Because so often he's coming on because we need to score. I think there's definitely a trust there, because I think when you look back to last season, Iwata and Peck played and Leonard was lucky if he got 5 minutes off the bench towards the end. Like, Doyle is coming on early enough in games to actually show that that Davies does like what he brings to us. It's just hard to know exactly why. Again, it's the kind of thing you'd love Davies to come out and explain, wouldn't you, and just sort of say, right, Doyle does this, but he's also doing this, this, and this, which is causing us an issue here, and here.
Yeah.
And he's never going to do that, is he? So when he's coming on, he's jumping, like very quick to go jump out, but he's also leaving a lot of space in behind him. But he's coming on in games where, you are essentially trying to chase a goal, which means that naturally he's going to be a little more on the front foot and try and get things done quickly, because his job has been to come on and actually make things happen rather than from the start of a game, you've got to find that bit more balance in the nature of the game. So it's hard to judge him with the off-ball stuff at the moment.
Yeah. Let's throw it forward a little bit. Look at the state of play. Blues are now 17th in the league with 12 points from their opening 10 games. 3 wins, 3 draws, 4 defeats. 5 points from the last 21 on offer, though. Blues actually started this season quite well with 7 from their opening 3, but 5 points from the last 21 obviously isn't a good run of form. Everyone is aware of that. Chris Davies is more than aware of that. How do you think? I mean, you're a fan, Ryan. You sit on the terraces every week. You engage in conversations on social media. How do you think supporters are feeling about it at the moment?
I think there's a mix between two camps. I've got to be honest, I came off social media a couple of months ago. So I'm less attuned on there now. But obviously I do still see things come through, and we've got a group chat with a few of us. And it seems to be that there's a lot of very big takes. And I think probably a lot of people also desperate to be the first one to be like, I told you so with this stuff. Which makes it quite difficult. I think a lot of people, certainly the people I speak to, are very, they understand that we are a good side and just being hit constantly by, just daft moments. It feels like there's been more pressure on Davies, and I think a big issue is, results play a big part in it, don't they? But also there is an element of we aren't scoring enough goals and we're conceding too many, and ultimately that is always going to be a black mark against you when it doesn't feel like you constantly. We progress into the final third and have good territory, but we don't necessarily pepper the opposition box in the way that a lot of fans will probably expect that we'd do. And I think that, as much as anything, is increasing the frustration across the fan base, I'd say. It doesn't feel like we're going to score at any moment until we reach the back end of the game where we need a goal, and Dykes has come on and all of a sudden we start swinging in crosses.
Yeah, there has been that urgency more than a few times this season. Do we think there needs to be a tweak to the way that Blues are playing? Do we think things need to change? Because every time that question is put to Chris Davies, he's very much like, I believe that, success comes if you stick to something over a long period of time. So he's clearly married to his principles. He's married to the 4-2-3-1 shape. He's married to how Blues build up from the back. Do we think there needs to be a little bit of flexibility, or are you happy to see it kind of roll in this way in the hope that eventually it will turn around and go back to more what it was like last season where Blues were able to get results?
I'm a bit torn at the moment. The problem is when you look at everything with our game, we don't concede many shots. It's just that when we do, we seem to get punished every time. We are one of the best pressing teams in the league. We are very front-footed. We are very, despite what will be said, yes, there is possession, but we are actually a very, the way we play is very attack-minded. We often end up, leaving 2 men back, 1 midfield, and we push a lot of bodies forward. Almost everything about our game is geared towards us being a very good side, and we're just not quite clinical enough in both boxes. I think there is probably an element where if we changed our style and tweaked things and went for a perhaps more direct attacking approach, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up scoring a few more goals and therefore getting a few results, and would find that because the nature of the tweak, would probably get that little bounce where, we're underperforming in front of goal, we're underperforming defensively, we would go on to pick up results at both ends, improve at both ends. But I do think at some point we'd start to even out because we'll be conceding more chances than we are at the moment. And it's a very difficult balance where I don't know if we release the tension a little bit and sort of play with a bit more of an open game plan, we probably will pick up a few results, but I don't necessarily think it'd be the best for us long term. And it's balancing that short term against the long term and wondering what the best outcome would be. I'm still very much of the opinion that the way we're playing at the moment, results should come. But it's becoming increasingly hard to get behind that when, even when you do play well, like we did on Saturday, we still get punished at the other end. And it just I said to you beforehand, I had that horrible pang in my stomach at the end of that game, like we are witnessing the beginning of the end. And I don't necessarily think Davies has done an awful lot wrong, and it just feels like the tide is going to turn against him. And I don't know what follows. I really hope that, he either makes a positive change or something just goes right and just triggers that reaction and we do hit a winning run. But I just had that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach after Saturday that I don't know where things go from here, and I don't know what the answers are, and I don't know how it improves within the current structure. But by completely throwing the structure, I think we become a worse team longer term, and we have a lot more questions and a lot more issues to answer. It's a difficult one to answer, and I'm probably not explaining what I'm trying to say very well, but it's, I don't think an immediate bounce of a change of system would necessarily breed things to be better in the long term based on all the statistics and the analysis and stuff. And it's a tricky one to try and explain.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree that you kind of got to try and play through this, but then we are in that results business where kind of you can't just keep playing well and losing. So moving it forward to Preston, hopefully Blues can start getting things back on track. Got the lowdown from Preston reporter George Hodgson on the Lily Whites.
Really positive, mate, to be honest. I think obviously North End went down to the last day of the season last year and we're in relegation trouble. And then you come into this season and everyone's saying, oh, you'll be down there again. And they needed to have a good summer. If they hadn't have had a good summer, I think they might have been in trouble, but they had a really good one. As I mentioned before we started, didn't spend much money, spent about £1.5 million, £2 million, which is not much in this day and age in the Championship, but quality via the loan market, some really smart free transfers. And I think the manager always seemed the right fit. And it was just massive. Obviously, they stayed up at Bristol City back in May. And now they're looking upwards. Yeah, it's been a really encouraging first 10 games.
I say Paul Heckingbottom really has got previous at this level, hasn't he? So how impressive a job has he done since he came in last season?
Yeah, it was bizarre, the whole sliding into trouble, because they'd looked a really good team in a lot of games, and especially against the likes of Leeds, Burnley, Sunderland, they went right toe-to-toe with them and looked more than a match. And then the goalkeeper got injured and suddenly they were, catapulted into real trouble. But he always seemed the right fit. As I said, a good fit for North End. I think he's relatable for our fans. You could see why he'd taken a team out of the division before. And he's just got the players now. He's made his mark on it. McCall is another good fit. He's number 2. And there's a bit of harmony around Preston, which there hasn't been for a while, really. There's always been a bit of a backdrop of apathy and frustration, but the whole club just seems in a pretty good place at the minute. And I think he's been a massive part in that.
Yeah, I'm sure Blues fans listening will probably be a little bit envious of the start Preston have made to the league season. So 4 wins, 4 draws, 2 defeats. Those 2 defeats coming away from home at Preston, Portsmouth and West Brom. Very, very solid home record again. What's been the key to it? And also, has it been a surprise, because you mentioned the lack of money spent in the summer. Has it been a surprise they've been able to kind of, start the season in much better fashion than a team like Birmingham City, who have spent more money and have paid bigger wages?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think money always equals instant success, but you certainly last few years it's played a part. Like the teams at the top of it have spent money, and for them to have built this squad, and it's not a squad for the next 3 years because a lot of the best players are on loan, but they're really good players on loan, and they're going to play a massive part this year. So for this season, there's a proper squad there that's going to give it a good go. And Daniel Everson returned on a perm this summer. He makes incredible saves. He wins the team points on his own, so he's priceless. He's brought more out of the back 3 in front of him, which just looks a really solid defensive group of players that have a bit of continuity starting every week together. Sprinklings of talent in the final third, because last season North End relied a lot on Emil Rees and Militanos Majic to score their goals, but looking at it now, there's Lewis Dobbin, Alfie Devine, Daniel Jefferson's up and running. Michael Smith will chip in at this level, obviously, and someone at the other end of his career. But Thierry Small's got a couple. They've added athleticism, they've added speed, which was a massive thing they were missing. So, he's improved a lot of elements of the team. And, there doesn't look an obvious real weakness to them, which I'm not saying they're going to be playoffs or anything, but it just looks a solid team and the type that I would have associated Heckingbottom building when they appointed him. So quite excited by it, really.
Yeah, you always get a real contrast of styles in the Championship, don't you? So you've got teams like Birmingham City who want to dominate the ball and basically suffocate the opponent into defeat. And then you've got teams like Preston who are quite happy, is it fair to say, not to have the ball all the time and playing a 3-5-2 and can counter-attack if they need to?
Yeah, I think they're not like dead defensive. They do like to get the ball down and play. They've brought in Harrison Armstrong, who just looks quality from Everton. Yeah. Divine. And they've progressed in terms of everyone happy to take the ball. There looks more going on in possession and stuff. They're not just, previous years it has been a back five and a proper back five that, you're not going to break us down and we try and nick it 1-0 perhaps. But there looks a lot of strings to Preston's bow, which is exciting to see. If it's not working, he's got a lot of different tools to bring off the bench and stuff. The bench looks pretty strong, so nice depth to it. But yeah, I think he's quite pragmatic, Heckingbottom. I think he'll know exactly what every team is going to try and do, and he will then look at his team and think, what's the best way of getting a result? And I think, to be honest, we've mentioned the money North End have spent. That's got to be the way they do it. There's no point in trying to be brash and say we're going to play everyone else off the park with this really amazing football, because it's probably not going to happen. So, I think he's got it spot on.
Yeah, fair enough. Some of business, you've mentioned some of the signings Preston made. I liked Thierry Small when he was at Charlton in League One last season. Who are the ones that have really stood out so far? Yeah,
probably Everson between the sticks. He's probably earned the team 6 or 7 points already. He did an assist on the opening day at QPR, and if you've not seen his save against Bristol City in the 94th minute, then just go and have a look at that. It was like absolutely ridiculous. Alfie Devine was probably the standout loan at the start, and then Dobbin got going. They looked really good together. And then, Thierry Small's been excellent. He started every game. I say excellent. He's had up and downs. He's not the finished article yet, but you can see a player that in 2 or 3, 4 years could be playing in the Premier League. So have to see how he gets on. And then, Smith's been a handful up front. Jebison's up and running with his first goal, and he's split opinion a bit, but there's something quite likeable about him. He works incredibly hard and runs. He can run like the wind. So quite excited to see what he can do this season. I think he might start against Birmingham. So most of them have contributed, to be honest.
Yeah, there are some big bodies in this Preston team. Are they good at set pieces? Because that has been a real Achilles heel of Birmingham City so far this season.
Has it? That's interesting then. Maybe Michael Smith will come in on Tuesday to start. They've got better. It was something the manager identified last season, that we're nowhere near good enough from corners. We don't carry a big enough threat. And they've worked on that. And there are big lads in the team. And like I mentioned before, I think a team like Preston, it would be negligent to not try and maximise corners and stuff, because they're that type of team, really, that there's no reason why they can't carry a real threat. So I wouldn't say they're absolutely outstanding, but certainly they're getting better at it. The crosses are good, and there is some size in that team. So that's an interesting one, to be fair. I'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Well, I've probably done your homework for you there.
Predicted 11. Smith starts.
Finally, George, just a prediction. Preston done very well at home this season. Blues' last trip to Preston, I think, ended in a 2-1 defeat, one of John Eustace's final games in charge. How do you see this one going?
I think it maybe go for the same scoreline. There's something about there's nothing tangible to back this up, but midweek at Deepdale, I've rarely seen North End lose. They're really good midweek at home under the lights. So I think they'll go into it confident. That's not to say they're going to win. They just don't lose many. So, but they'll be hurting after losing at West Brom. I don't think they deserve to. They've been good at home. So, probably I'll go for a 2-1 win, but I think there'll be goals. I don't think it'll be dull. So, I'm sure Birmingham fans will come in the numbers and should be a crackling atmosphere, really, under the lights. So, looking forward to it.
Lovely. Thank you very much, George. Appreciate that.
Cheers, mate.
Ryan, Blues' last trip to Preston didn't end well, a 2-1 defeat, which kind of proved to be the beginning of the end for John Eustace almost 2 years ago. So Preston have started the season really, really well. 8th in the league, 4 wins, 4 draws, 2 defeats, averaging 45% possession, as we mentioned earlier. So they're not one of the teams that will try to dominate the ball. They'll probably look to let Blues have possession and hit them on the counter. But they are unbeaten at Deepdale still. Only Middlesbrough, I believe, have a better home record than Preston so far in the Championship. they're not terrible on set pieces, but they're not particularly good either, which has obviously been a bit of an Achilles heel of Blues. So they've scored 2 and conceded 2, which is probably a fair bit better than Blues 1-4 and 6 against. And they have only conceded 9 goals in the league. How are we viewing this game from a Blues perspective? Are we expecting Blues to go there and win, or would a point given Preston's home form be a good result?
I think in isolation, any point on the road in the Championship is generally a good point. It feels like with the way things have gone in our form recently, a win would do a lot of good for the confidence. Even if it is we have 3 shots, win 1-0 and it's a dull game. Just pick up the 3 points, do whatever you need to do, and just get out of there with some sort of result. A clean sheet would be lovely. I'd quite happily take a 0-0 at this point. But yeah, I think you've got to go there and look to win the game. A point probably isn't the worst result in the world, but it just continues that run of not having won a game then, which I think the fans need to see a win at this point.
Yeah. Well, looking to win the game, let's talk team selection. Obviously, James Beadles seems to have the shirt now, did very well against Hull, made a few really good saves, probably could have scored, but we'll let that slide because he's a goalkeeper. Bryce Samuel, does he come back in at right back, do you think?
One of our big issues earlier in the season was that when we were playing down the right-hand side, we had Neumann, Asai Samuel and Iwata trying to link and play. And every time we broke and pulled the ball out to that side, attacks broke down. We ended up going backwards or losing the ball and having to start again. It left us very one-sided. So I don't know whether Davies is quite enjoying having Iwata join him to midfield with Clara sort of going out and Roberts and Anderson dovetailing, or whoever Roberts has been dealing with. But it feels like the sensible solution is to get Asai Samuel back in the side, just give us a right back and give us a bit more of a natural balance rather than perhaps having too many players out of position, which maybe was a problem the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going for the Brian Dick square pegs in square holes here, to be honest. I would put Asai Samuel back at right back, and Cochrane obviously picks himself at left back at the moment. Irrespective of form, really, because there's not really any other competition. Centre back, Clara +1 has to be Neumann, I think, as we've mentioned before. So there's your back 4, which is the back 4 Blues started the season with. Midfield 2, if Asai Samuel is playing at right back, it's Iwata +1, isn't it? And for this game, because Blues we expect to have more of the ball, I think I would probably throw Tommy Doyle in as we're in that 3-game week. If Doyle doesn't perform to the level, then Peck can quite easily come back in for the game on Saturday. But part of me, in the back of my mind, does think that with Chris Davies desperate for a win, he's going to stick with his tried and trusted duo in there. And I can see a bit of a meltdown coming at 6:45 or wherever it is the team's announced when Tommy Doyle's not named.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be a case of getting back to basics. The back 4 you've mentioned, I think Neumann and Clara, and I think Neumann will just play on that right hand side, Clara back in the centre, Iwata back in midfield, and then Peck next to him. It feels like the obvious solution, or the obvious selection, really.
Yeah. Maybe not a game to take risks. And then right hand side, I think Patrick Roberts does pick himself at the moment. Given the way he played against Hull and Wrexham. Damari Gray has started every game on the left, so you have to presume he's going to start as well. And then your number 10, I actually thought Keshi Anderson for 50 minutes, probably before he got tired, looked really good against Hull at the weekend. So I would be inclined to stick with him and keep Stansfield up front, because I've said a couple of times on previous podcasts that I do think Stansfield is the best solution up front for Blues right now. And I don't think that should still be the case because of the strikers they've signed. But Kyogo hasn't settled and keeps missing chances, so you can't trust him to start at the moment, I don't think. And obviously Marvin Duck's had fitness issues, and Lyndon Dykes, for all his brilliance off the bench, when he has had starts, he hasn't quite done it for me.
Roberts, Gray and Stansfield for like the obvious 3. I'm just trying to work out. Problem is with Anderson, when he started the weekend, he played very much on that right-hand side and dropped to the right, sort of got Roberts more involved in the centre. If you're going to play Asai Samuel and then you're going to have Iwata in there, then presumably Anderson isn't going to be dropping out there, so he's going to be playing more sort of towards the left-hand side, and it's whether Anderson and Gray sort of dovetail out there. But the problem
could
is
potentially give Gray a little more freedom. Could potentially give Gray a little more freedom, because that's something I think a few people have wanted, because Gray has had to probably do a little bit too much tracking back to help Cochrane. If you could get Anderson back in those positions as well, where he was so effective last season, then maybe Gray could have a little bit more license to do what we all know he can at this level.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't dislike the idea of Anderson and Gray, and like I say, it might free up Gray a little bit more, and hopefully the guys on the right-hand side will do enough to actually allow us to get hold of the ball and spring out the other side. I'm quite happy for Anderson to carry on playing that 10 role. I think the options, as you say, at the moment are Anderson, Kumas, Kyogo and Dykes, which, it's a bit much for muchness. I suppose with Anderson, at least, he is reliable and very tactically switched on, which means, you're going to have 11 players essentially, or for the most part, that Davies probably has a lot of trust in on the pitch, which I think is going to be important at this time, given that you need results. It feels a lot more like I wouldn't say a battle-hardened team, but it feels like, you've got square pegs in square holes, and you've got players that I'd imagine Davies will trust to just go on, win the battles, get hold of the ball and play and get things moving. So, yeah, I'm probably siding with Anderson as well. Keep him in the 10 position, let him work off Gray and Stansfield and go from there. Yeah,
reliability, I suppose, is key when you're in this position that Blues have found themselves in recently. Ryan, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hopefully, we're back later in the week talking about a Blues victory, looking ahead to Bristol City. It's a big keep right on from both of us.